Hi everyone, welcome to ELI, the place where you get your daily dose of inspiration for entrepreneurship. And today we have with us Mr. Shrey Mishra, who is the co-founder of XR Central and Gaming Central. XR Central is an interactive technology studio focused on solving problem statements using AR, VR, and XR technologies across industry verticals. And Gaming Central develops cutting-edge game-based experiences for brands and consumers in again AR, VR, and XR. Uh,
Okay.
Hi, Shrey. Welcome to ELI.
Thanks, Priyanjan, for having me today on ELI. Um,
I would request you to introduce yourself to our audience, please.
sure. I started off my journey. Of course, I would say, a lot of entrepreneurs start with engineering. So I did my engineering, and I used to do shell scripting and those sort of things. And then somewhere down the line, I felt that I wanted to do something which was more creative, where I could sort of contribute more. So, I interned with a few startups, one of those being Hacker Rank. Those guys had just started off. I think it was just before their Y Combinator days. And I was super excited to see what and how things sort of slowly, gradually develop into. So I could see that, they started off with mock interviews, then they sort of pivoted a model to a model where, they started doing coding reviews and all of those sort of things. Somewhere down the line, I also realized that I needed some work experience. So, I worked for a few years at a digital marketing startup based out of Noida. A lot of fun. The founders are very open, and I got to work with a lot of brands and a lot of, I would say, um, communities as well. So just like you, Priya, I mean, the way you sort of developing entrepreneur community, we were sort of developing a lot of brand communities on Facebook. So if you remember, between 2010 and 14, the Facebook community thing was like huge, right? So
Right.
so that's where I sort of worked with the team and a lot of, I would say, marquee brands, and help them build the communities on Facebook and other social platforms. Somewhere down the line, I realized that that's something which is interesting, something which I have a given knack of. So that's where the gaming central journey started. So, initially the thought was to maybe have something in e-commerce. You chat with friends, that's how it gets started, right? You chat with friends, you talk about starting something up. And I felt the easiest way to start was actually start on Facebook and see if there is a community for gamers. So ever since I started the Facebook page in a very informal manner, I felt that I could strike a chord with the audience, and the community grew organically very quickly. So I think we were 100,000 page likes very quickly within, I think, a few months, and then there was no looking back. After a point of time, after we reached critical mass, I sort of got into it full time, and we started sort of, you can say, consulting very gaming focused brands. So for the first 3 years, between 2014 and 17, our journey was more like you can say, a gaming agency of sorts, right? So any gaming brand would come to us, so be it Nvidia or a HP Omen or a PlayStation, and we would actually help them craft a community engagement strategy, be it online or offline, to help them reach out to gamers. So somewhere there down the line, we were growing the gaming central community as well as we were helping them. So sort of it was hitting the right spot, and we had a lot of fun. So we actually crafted a lot of, you can say, college campaigns, a lot of corporate gaming leagues, and all of that. Somewhere down the line, what we were realizing was that our interest or our bent of mind was more towards creating something which we could call our own. So that's where we started doing a pivot towards developing that tech. Because when we are basically marketing a publisher's game, right? So we realized that, okay, while the advertising part is something which is working all right on the portal, on the Facebook side, but we wanted to create our own stuff. So that's where you can say shift towards XR and B2B started. And we've not looked back since. That's where you can say we sort of sowed the seeds for XR Central, right? XR Central in terms of the identity is it's more towards creating stuff using XR, augmented, virtual, and mixed reality, as well as using stuff around games and gamifications, whatever we sort of interpret as well, right? So we work very closely with brands like SpiceJet, as well as others in the space, and we help them build a solution. So yeah, in the last 3 years, we've actually done a pivot towards augmented and virtual reality technologies. We create immersive, learning campaigns. In the pandemic, actually, we did a lot of virtual events on our gaming engine-based platform, and that's where I would say the third leg of our journey started, where we are now developing a product which is right out there. We're doing a pre-alpha for brands right now. So we're working very closely with our given set of alpha brands, and then we're planning to roll it out. So it's more with the more in term called the metaverse, which all of us are hearing now. So in some way, in a small way, we are also working towards that, I would say. Yeah. So in general, I would say from 2014 till now, our identity has been around gaming and interactive tech. Yeah. I hope that
Yeah,
sets
absolutely.
the
Uh,
yeah.
Tell us more about XR Central and Gaming Central in the context of what is the technology that is being used, and how is the team structured, what kind of clients do we approach, and more importantly, what kind of real life problems we solve.
Right. So I'll start with something where we sort of helped a pharmaceutical company. So very interesting anecdote where um, I was actually there for a jury at one of these entrepreneur meets, and I met Namita, and she was looking at building something in gamification for her medical reps. So Namita heads MCure Pharmaceuticals, and the problem statement there was simple. You have a lot of medical representatives who have to spend a very long time, waiting outside for the doctor, right? So how to engage them without making it too intrusive for them as well. So the end goal being learning and engaging the medical representatives, right? But at the same time, not in a boring manner, right? So what we did was we created a quizzing application, a multiplayer quizzing application for all the medical representatives based out of or who are working for Encho. To our surprise, we saw a great engagement rate. We had close to 80% of the users being engaged on a daily basis, and I would say that actually set up the pedestal for us to create gamification apps. Another example of this is something which we've done for SpiceJet in the last 3 years. So we've worked extremely closely with them, with their learning and training team, and we've actually crafted the whole e-learning strategy and the immersive, I would say, immersive learning strategy. So using stuff like games, so we use a runner game, for example, so that the cabin crew is engaged as well as they have a learning outcome at the same time. Now, whatever points they earn through answering the questions, that goes up on a leaderboard and it's connected to the rewards system, right? So there's like a feedback loop which sort of comes back, and they are actually able to learn and contribute to their day-to-day thing as well. Now we are actually going to the next level where we are introducing XR-based virtual spaces for you can say immersive simulations as well for them. So I would say in these couple of examples, you'll get a basic flavor of work of what we do. A lot of our work actually is dependent, I would say, on the gaming engines which we use, because that's where the interactivity comes from. Apart from that, we do take a device agnostic approach. So when I say device agnostic approach, I would say when we started off, it was more based on using a VR headset per se. and creating it just for that standalone VR headset. But as you know, or any gamer would say, that the fun in gaming actually comes from the multiplayer aspect, right? And the lesser your dependency on the device, the better usually it is, right? So what we started doing was that we started porting all our virtual reality applications to the web. So all our applications, and that's in some ways our USP as well. So all our applications can be run on a browser. So browsers are extremely easily available across smartphones and the desktop as well. And then, of course, if you do have a VR headset, then great, you can sort of straight away open that link on the browser and it runs perfectly well. So I would say that's in some ways that's been the mix. In terms of a team composition, it's usually a mix of developers, I would say. But design and development go hand in hand. So we have a team of developers who work on the game engine as well as the web, and we do have a fairly well-equipped design team as well to sort of take care of the UI, UX, as well as the asset design part of it and the asset optimization part of it. So that those are, I would say, those are the key elements. And then, of course, as we move, content is going to be the key as well, a bit of research as well. So as we are moving, we are sort of keeping more, you can say, time for research as well, because that's extremely important for, and especially in the domain which we are. So that's how it is.
We'll talk more about the team, but first I would like to uh, uh, ask you this. You spoke about the aviation example where you built some VR based game from for a aviation company, and if you look at it closely, you'd see that aviation has been doing the virtual things for a very long time. Simulation is a big part of how a pilot is trained. Uh, and that is how they learned a big part of their job of piloting a aircraft. What I want to ask you is, what is the role of simulation in everyone else's life, especially for other jobs, like you mentioned the pharma example and all. uh, Now, why I'm asking this is, many of the edtech companies recently also have started taking the AR and VR, or should I say, adapting the AR VR into the learning process. How does a AR VR and simulation play a role in the learning process?
I think it's. I mean, the answer lies in the question itself. I think when you think of, let's say, education per se, it's extremely important, right? Because the more you engage, the more you interact. Usually, you will see research studies which state that the more you interact with something, the better the learning is. So be it, let's say, learning at the school or the college level, or be it training at the corporate level, it's extremely important for you to engage with stuff which you are thrown out at the same time. I would say, I mean, I like to explain it with an example. So for example, let's say you take the example of SpiceJet, right? Now, while the pilots do have that that edge with the simulators, right? Now think of a cabin crew. A cabin crew is a very simple graduate, and after a 6-month training, they are thrown into situations which can be extremely tough. You could have first aid situations which come on the flight. You could have hijacking situations which can come there. There could be emergency landing situations. Now, how do you deal with those stressful situations? And then there can be something as simple as seat exchange scenarios, right? So it's happened with me as well. I had a ticket for a seat and there was another passenger who had the same number. Now, how does a cabin crew really deal with that? Is what and where simulations can come in extremely well, right? Because the more you're prepped up, the more you train, the better it is, right? So, for example, be it hijacking scenarios, these are extremely stressful scenarios, and that's why simulating those just with role play becomes extremely tough. But you can do that extremely well with virtual reality. So the way we usually craft stuff, and I think that's the global standard as well, is that you need to really look at what the simulation has to be created, right? For example, let's say it's a hijacking scenario. In that case, it would need a virtual reality headset because you would need to be totally immersed in that situation. There needs to be scripting. It needs to sort of measure the haptics and how quickly you took those decisions, right? And the better you took those decisions, it's like a decision tree. The better you take those decisions, the better you are at maybe stopping that when it actually happens, right? Or maybe salvaging the situation. At the same time, when you have, let's say, industrial scenarios, like let's say which wire to cut, the red or the blue, right? In those sort of scenarios, I would say augmented reality comes in very handy, because and there's another term which we learned from one of our customers at Exalta, which was assisted reality, right? So you have a lot of these, you can say, industrials, solutions which are coming up, which are more to do with, you can say, augmented part of it and assisted part of it as well, where you could have actually an expert sitting on the other end, just like you would see commentary and commentators making those marks or those sort of things.
Mm.
That's where it would also come in. So there would be a lot of support services which can be powered by augmented. And then in terms of the simulation, that's learning and training. We've seen a surge in museums as well. So if you go to a lot of museums who've seen a recent upgrade, you will usually see that a lot of screens have been sort of put in, right? And I think that sort of really defeats the purpose. The actual fun in a museum is actually, that tactile feedback to really see an artifact. And I think globally museums have moved towards a place where they are actually integrating augmented or virtual reality solutions, so that you can visualize something. So, for example, we created an Egyptian gallery, sort of a pyramid experience for one of the museums, and it got great response. And this was just before the pandemic hit. Now I'm sure once everything comes back to normal and people want to sort of look at different avenues, those are the different scenarios where you would see XR coming in very handy. Yeah.
Mm. You spoke about beautiful examples like the pyramid and which were to cut. Can you give us a comprehensive list of industries where the XR and VR can be uh, applied to a very effective extent?
Yeah, I think generally we are seeing applications across the board. So, for example, let's start with education. Education is a very big use case. So, be it simulations for STEM labs or simulating general content in textbooks. Those are big areas. Also, I would say, since we are in the education domain, so that's one. Then you move to the corporate side of things. Then there's training and simulation, which comes extremely handy for industries across the spectrum. So be it communication scenarios like customer support scenarios, or you could also have industrial shop floor scenarios, right? So let's say you have a machine and you want to collaborate on that. You want to see how that works. So that's also some place. Another interesting example is tourism, right? So, for example, as the pandemic is sort of slowly coming towards its end, fingers crossed, you will see a surge in tourism, right? And before you actually travel to a given place, you would like to sort of research a bit more about the place, or so that's also some place where XR, or both augmented and virtual reality, are coming in extremely handy. So these are like two big spaces. Retail is another, because if you see, players like Lenskart, people are sort of testing their glasses right from the app, right? So retail is a very big scenario. Even in the very recent metaverse showcase by Mark Zuckerberg, he showcased the fabric, how the fabric looks, and I think that's why, as you move, you're actually moving to a very world which looks more like Ready Player One of sorts, not immediately, but I think over a period of time. And you'll see similar applications. So I would say AR glasses, we're very close to that coming into the picture. Uh, Another very interesting example is what you're now seeing in cars. So you have head-mounted displays, right? So you have those displays coming in with the Kia Seltos and others as well. So it's becoming extremely consumer grade, and I think as you move, you're going to see a lot of applications. Uh, as we see it as an agency or as a development company in the space, we see a host of applications across. So we see it as a horizontal, you know. But when you look at the top 2 or 3 use cases, we do see training and simulation as one very big application. We include edtech in that as well, in that itself, because that sort of becomes that big subset of the same. Then you have retail, which is another huge set, because you have retail across. You can have experience centers, you can have house tours, you can have hotel tours, and those sort of things. Yeah. So that's where we are. So I think there's an adoption curve which is coming with hardware prices coming extremely low, becoming extremely consumer grade, and I think we're a year or two away. As soon as I think Apple launches their glasses, we're going to see that aspirational value increasing very quickly as well. And then, of course, as you know, there would be Chinese counterparts coming in with their versions of those VR glasses. So then that technology becomes extremely mainstream.
Okay. So I have few more questions around it. Now I would like to love to hear about your team. How did you find the team to build this venture?
Okay, that's a short question, and maybe that might have a longish answer. But yeah,
Sure.
I think so. My co-founder happens to be my school friend, so our association goes a long way back. So that's Anshul. Um, I would say you usually a bit more philosophical of sorts, but I would say usually the kind of stuff which you intend to do or you're doing, that is what attracts the kind of people around you, right? So very obvious also. So for example, a lot of our stuff has been around games. So we do have a bunch of gamers and game programmers who work with us, right? So I would say since we've been very close to institutions, a lot of our engineers do come from institutions where we have had partnerships with them.
Mhm.
So yeah, so in terms of building the team, of course, my co-founder is my school friend. Then as we've moved, the gaming central journey also helped. So you learn through the way. So of course your internship portals and those sort of things help. We usually look at self learners. So of course everyone is different. It's like a one-to-one thing which happens, but I would say we usually look at self learners and someone who can sort of do things on their own, because as you know, in startups you don't really get time to train. So we do give a free leeway for folks to sort of experiment with stuff. It can be extremely fun for some and extremely intimidating for others, because some people do like structure, and there's no offense in that. It's fine. I mean, there's a different work setup for everyone, right? So I would say for us, it's been, I think we've been lucky that some of our team members were there with us were in the gaming central journey, and then they were willing to sort of pivot to development. So that's something which happened, and they've stuck with us. So, one after the other with our institutional partnerships also, it's more of a hit and trial, I would say. And then we usually start with a trainee of sorts. We have trainees, then they are absorbed, and then that's how the journey goes. So it's been a mix of developers. So we give them an initial sort of a duration for them to test waters, for them to experiment, and then usually we sort of absorb full time. Yeah.
Uh,
So yeah, that's how we went about it. That's how I think a lot of startups in our ecosystem go about doing things.
right. If I may go a little deeper, can you tell us about the tech stack in play and the background of this entire thing?
Yeah, so the tech stack in play, as I told you, we use both game engines like Unity. So we do use Unity for a lot of our stuff, especially WebGL games.
Mhm.
We develop a lot of WebGL games. All of those are done in Unity. For stuff which are more pertaining to our XR based applications, we use an open source engine called Babylon, as well as we use 3.js and A-Frame.
Okay.
So that forms the core, as well as currently MERN is something which is sort of more around the globe. It's being used for scalable web applications. So we do use MERN stack for the application. So on the game engine side of things, we develop on top of Babylon and 3.js. And then we sort of use MERN for scaling it up. And then we have cloud services. So that's basically off the shelf cloud services. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, what is the next thing you have in mind for the venture? What is the vision? Any plans to become a product company?
Yeah, incidentally, we are. So we are actually in that pivot right now.
Okay.
So till now, we have been services as you could gather from the kind of discussions we've been having. In the last 1 year, we've been actually doing that pivot towards being a product company. We're working on a metaverse product. To be honest, we used to call it a virtual spaces platform, but metaverse is the in thing right now. So we're calling it the metaverse. But I would say it's a virtual spaces platform where you could sort of create your own virtual space. So let's say you want to do a meetup of all the members at ELI, you could
Mm,
actually do that on our platform by creating a whole gallery and actually moving around just like you would do in a game with avatars and everything, right?
okay.
So that's the whole idea. We want to sort of democratize XR. Till now, XR has been extremely slow. If you see, and if you've been analyzing, VR has been there for years.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that it's not been there. It's just that you're seeing more traction coming in now. So we feel that right now it is at an inflection point where or it's reached a threshold value where now it can sort of grow exponentially. We feel that we're at the right place right now because we do have products. We do have the product in some shape and form in the initial MVP stage. We do have a given set of customers. So the way we are approaching it is more B2B and not B2C. You have sort of conglomerates like Facebook doing it B2C for
Mm,
people. We on the other end are more B2B. You can say sort of Shopify for XR of sorts. So that's what we have in mind. Our product is slated for an initial launch early next year. So the first quarter next year is when you'll have early access for the platform. So that's where we are. So apart from that, we have sort of done partnerships in the US as well. So you might see us doing a pivot towards towards the North America market as well. So that's where we are. Yeah.
mm. Okay. Uh, can you tell us
Taking
about?
days.
Okay, nice. Uh, can you tell us about the different challenges that you have faced along the way while building and growing this venture?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of challenges keep coming. I think one of the first challenges is the talent, because it's the team which sort of takes it forward, be it a product or a service. So I think the first challenge has been for us to build the team, um, especially in the XR space because it's extremely new. It's a niche within a niche. Gaming itself is a niche, and then having XR is another big niche within the a segment. So I think making people aware on the hiring side of things when you're hiring folks, and asking them to be patient, or sort of explore, asking them to keep exploring stuff is also there. I think we've been also extremely lucky in that aspect. So we've been persistent at one end, but we've also been extremely lucky, I would say, that the folks have persisted with us. um, so I would say one of the challenges has been building the team. The other challenge, I think, which firms do face is, I would say, as a services company, the cash circulations, right? So financials, right? So keeping it financially viable and financially stable, so that it goes hand in hand, right? If there's a crunch, then it becomes extremely tough for you to maintain the team. So uh, yeah, so I think that's something which has been there, which we've been able to manage extremely well for the last few years, and fingers crossed we'll manage it as we move as well. Yeah. So I think those are two critical challenges. I think the last one being scaling as a services company. So I would say scaling in general is a challenge which everyone faces as an entrepreneur. We also face the same, and that's why we are taking the product route, because at one point of time we have realized that what XR actually needs is a platform approach and not a services approach. So yeah, so that's where we are, I think.
Okay. Speaking of gaming, I think as you rightly said that XR VR has been there for a good amount of time, but it's not adopted by the mass yet. You also spoke about Ready Player One kind of uh, technology coming mainstream. If I may ask you, what is the time frame do you look at when we will go to a point where a big part of a gaming community would be using AR and VR for their gaming applications?
I would say, I think in terms of stuff going extremely mainstream for AR, it's right now. So it's happening as we speak. So you have folks like Niantic working on platforms like Lightsail. I think I'm getting the right name. Maybe if not, then maybe I'll need to correct myself. But Niantic has been working on those sort of platforms, and as well as some other companies, right?
Okay.
So there are, in terms of AR reaching that global scale, it's certainly there. For VR also, I would say with platforms like Oculus, right? It has reached a very good scale. Yes, we haven't seen Oculus becoming mainstream in India, because I would say there are import issues. There might be some compliance issues, right? So in terms of VR, I still feel, while it's an extremely amazing and immersive tech, all that's stopping it from becoming mainstream is, I would say, the hardware challenge, which I feel has been consistently moving towards becoming more consumer friendly. So I'll explain it with an example. So think of it like this: in 2015, we sort of went to Computex, right? And they had VR as the theme. So everywhere you go, you had virtual reality booths and theme. Now, what was the underlying hardware powering it? There were PCs, right? And there were extremely expensive VR headsets like HTC Vive, all wired and extremely tough for you to set up, right? So if you really look at it in Indian currency, it would mean at, let's say, a 1.5 to 2 lakh system, a 70,000 rupees VR headset. So you're looking somewhere upwards of 2.5 to 3 lakh rupees as a VR headset setup, right? And you need someone technical to manage it. You can't be a noob to manage and set up the virtual reality setup. But where are you right now? You are at $300 with the Oculus VR headset, Quest headset, which is totally standalone. You don't need any wires, and it gives you room scale experience, right? So you've come from, let's say, $3,000-$4,000 to $300. So I think we've really come down a long way. And this was Oculus Quest. The first version was launched, I think, 2019. So 2019, and now you've moved towards the Quest 2 also. I think in the Amazon sale, it was on sale for, I think, 34,000 or something, right? In India, abroad it's cheaper. So I think that's why it makes me extremely excited to say that, okay, maybe when you have the Apple AR headset or similar AR headsets, maybe people are excited about Apple because when Apple comes out with something, it becomes extremely consumer grade,
Absolutely.
mainstream, and I think that's when you will hit that sweet spot. So I think that we are already there towards a Ready Player One kind of a thing, but it's movies, so I mean,
Yeah.
there'll always be a correction factor attached to it. But just see what Pokemon Go did a few years back, right? It got
Yeah.
everyone excited. Everyone started knowing, okay, what is augmented reality? Or
Mm.
with the Google application for animals. When the
Mm.
pandemic hit, a lot of parents actually turned to it to actually show their kids what are different animals because they were not able to go to, let's say, a zoo. So
Mm.
they could show them what different animals look like and all of that. So I think it's becoming extremely consumer grade with your smartphones, with 4G and 5G, eventually 5G coming in. That would be extremely high speed internet at your disposal, right? So I think that's we're certainly moving at it at an extremely fast clip. Yeah, so
And
that's where
now,
we are.
coming to the personal side of being an entrepreneur, I would like to
Yeah.
ask a few questions around that. So,
So
first question is, how do you stay energetic throughout your entrepreneurial journey? I think it's been quite some time you have been an entrepreneur,
yeah.
and it requires a lot of attention, focus, and you have to be
Mhm.
consistent at it. However, there might be circumstances where you may feel tired, restless, or you lose focus, and
Mhm.
when you do that, your business also suffers. So how do you manage such situations?
I would say it's a very simple answer actually. It's all in the mind. So you need to sort of really be at it to be positive. No, I mean, being an entrepreneur, you have to be positive all the time. You have to be optimistic. Of course, there has to be some practicality to it, but you need to have a positive frame of mind. If you don't, because generally for any entrepreneur, there are challenges which come in day to day. Right? So you have to be extremely positive. You need to look at it in a way that you can sort of start or have a reset button every morning. So I think my sister mentioned to me a few years back before I actually even started off, where I think she unknowingly mentioned, but I took it extremely well. I would say, where she mentioned that you need to really start from zero every day, right? And I think when you start from zero every day, right, it's really helps you to sort of be in a good shape of mind. If you have too much baggage which you bring in every day, then I think it becomes extremely tough. And also, of course, keeping ego aside as well. So I think both of those things sort of helps me keep afloat. As far as the energy levels are concerned, everyone has their own, I would say, formula nowadays. I keep it, for me, it is keeping things extremely simple. Maybe, taking a walk or sort of driving around just to take a break as well. Because also staying a bit away from the screens. I know it's counterintuitive coming in from someone in tech, but I think also staying a bit away from the screens does help a lot. Yeah.
Okay. What is
Mm.
the role of co-founder in entrepreneur's life? If you can answer this from a personal point of view rather than
Hmm.
bringing a complementary skill set on board.
Yeah, I think it's more psychological also, right? So in terms of it's just like a relationship, right? So you need someone to share stuff with. So be it challenges or be it a fresh perspective also on things. So usually, I feel that a co-founder sort of brings in and shares that responsibility of running and taking forward the company.
Mm.
Of course, your traditional complementary skill set thing, of course, remains. So that's definitely it has to be there, because if it's not there, then it's not going to go long term. But yeah, I think definitely shouldering that responsibility of taking that whole company a vision forward is what you sort of look from a co-founder. And yeah, I've been extremely lucky to have one. But yeah, I think I would usually suggest to wait for the right time, and when the person comes in, it's fine, because everyone has a different recipe or a formula for this. And with a lot of venture funds and all coming in, they have a very extremely templated model to this. I mean, you'll know Priya Ranjan, so what to say, but yeah, that's how it is. But it helps. Otherwise, it becomes too much centered on one person. So it does impact and bias the decisions also, right? So always there needs to be a fresh perspective which comes in. Yeah.
Speaking of a venture fund, have you raised funding?
We've just finalized one round, which will be made official.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've just raised an initial seed round. We've been extremely, I would say, lucky to raise it from one of our. It's an initial seed round, not from a venture fund, but from one of our partner ventures called Net Profits. So we are very close to raising it and formalizing it. So that's where we are. The exact details, I think I'll be able to share in a few weeks.
Okay.
But as we formalize all of that, but yes, we have raised our rounds, first round, and now we are. Once it's done, I think we'll be focusing more on developing and launching the product, and then we'll be looking to raise. You can say a more formal round from a venture fund, but we've been in talks with early stage funds, so it's not that we haven't been. We were selected in Chirate Sonic as well as several marquee funds as well. And I think it's with the metaverse and the metaverse thing coming up very well. We do find ourselves in a sweet spot where I think for us we want to sort of structure it in a way where it's not just about raising money, but also sort of utilizing it and scaling it up. So I think we do have initial push right now. So we'll be sort of then closing the initial rounds in the next few months. Yeah.
Hmm.
That's
Having
where we are. So interesting journey. Yeah.
having said that, can you comment on what is the right time to raise funds for a venture?
I think it's very subjective for us. Exact. So for example, in our case, we are in our 7th year of operations, right? As I told you, we started off 2014. Um, so, and you will see a lot of journeys where people start off with a fundraise, right? They start the journey with a fundraise. So I think it's extremely subjective, but I think some parameters always remain. So whenever you are thinking of raising money, the founders or the founding team should know how their money management skills. They should know how and what they need to raise money for. I would say capital has always been there in the market. So it shouldn't be that your product is dependent on the capital. You're getting where I'm coming from. So, for example, it shouldn't be that you're just raising the money to keep the house running. The school of thought where we come from is that at least your product should be able to sustain some part of your running expenses. So, or at least you should know how to manage your running expenses before you reach that stage. I think raising money is it's it's an extremely risky task for the team also. And I think venture funds also appreciate that you should know how to manage that money and grow that money, because then in any which ways capital, be it debt or through venture funds, has been available, and it's always going to be available with China having running into such interesting waters. So I think India has a great opportunity to raise funds, and that's why you're seeing that action earlier.
Absolutely. Due to constraint of time, I just have two more questions for you. Tell us, what is the meaning of entrepreneurship for you? How would you define the term entrepreneur?
I think the way I define entrepreneur or just a startup is that you need to be ready for change. You need to be ready for uncertainty at all times. You need to sort of face it head on. if you're able to face it, then I think if you're willing to face it, then I think you figure out the solution in some way or the other. That's what in some ways we learn in engineering as well. A lot of times you sort of do a lot of things where you get the problem and you need to solve it, right? So I define it in this manner.
The last question. Uh,
Yeah.
Tell us about the different learnings that you have got as an entrepreneur, which we can take away and apply to our ventures.
Okay. I think few learnings. First one is that you need to be extremely um, critical when it comes to running it profitably. It needs to generate a revenue. That's something which a lot of us forget because we get into that whole venture fund shambang, right? The other one is that you need to decide quickly because you have to run it. The third thing is, running it patiently with a team as well. So I would say building the team is, I would say, more critical than raising capital sometimes, because you need to have a core team taking it forward. If you don't have that, then all that capital is of no use, because you can't sort of build the quality product also, or service that product also. So I think some of those things are very, very critical. And then of course, if you're building something, you build it for scale,
Right.
because if it's too small a problem which you're solving, then it's of no use. End of the day, we all are doing something to raise money or to make money also, right? Be it for social entrepreneurs or for generally for entrepreneurs also. So I think that building for scale is extremely important. We are lucky that we are in a region like India where we have the numbers, so, and the opportunities also. So yeah, so that's I think those are some learnings which we, at least I have had in the last few years, and I think can be useful for others as well.
Well, on this note, I think we have come to the end of our discussion. Thanks for your time, Shrey, and our best wishes for Excel Central and Gaming Central.
Thank you, Priyaranjan. Great talking to you as well.